Okay, so we spin around, we can have a look at the front. As I say, things like the nose, the cape underneath the nose, the front wing, all very similar to last year. No big concept changes here. But then you start to look at the front suspension, which is changed quite a bit at the front and the rear, as we'll come to see. Is they've raised the front wishbones up as high as they can go, and you can see that the front wishbone actually comes, the mounting comes right out of the wheel. This is an aerodynamic thing, and again, funnily enough, it's not the top wishbone that we should be looking at, it's the bottom wishbone, because you get that higher, and it gets all of the obstruction of the wishbone out of the way for the flow under the wing and lets all the barge boards work. So that's the key change that they've made there. Also, on the inboard side, they've changed the layout of the suspension. So the springs, the dampers, all the clever hydraulics is all quite different from last year. This is a completely new internal setup.
And I think I recall James Allison saying there'd been no sacrifice in terms of roll centre at the front, despite these changes. Yes,
exactly. That's what he was saying. He thinks that, you know, the changes were made were trying to get the suspension working in tune with aerodynamics, which was one of the kind of the diva-like qualities that it had on the car last year.
Right.
So the suspension changes were both aerodynamic improvements, but also to do that, not specifically playing about with things like roll sensors and different geometries and what have you.
And then if we move along to the side of the car, it's...
So, again, you go around and look at the side of the car. They don't have the Ferrari-style side pods, it's conventional side pods. The barge boards are as complicated as they've ever been. So all of this area really is working very much as it has been over the past year, over the past few years, because this has been a growing evolution of the Mercedes. Underneath is where more changes have happened. So we know that their engine is improved, and they've also done a lot of work, as they said at the launch, to improve the packaging. So they've actually got one of the exhausts is actually looped up over the engine covers to try and get the side pods in as slim as possible. So it's an aerodynamic thing, but how they cope with the thermal issues inside the bodywork with, you know, exhaust.
Well, how have they coped with the thermal issues?
Well, I mean, it looks like the exhaust literally runs over the top of one of the cam covers. So how can they cope with the heat of that? Clearly it does. The engine appears to have been reliable. And then, you know, through the back, it's all very similar. Again, the rear suspension's been lifted up, and they've actually had to hook the exhaust up and over the rear wishbone because it's mounted so high. And again, I think this is, as James Allison said, this is much more an aerodynamic thing at the back.
Yeah. I made the point last year that when you have a rate car, potentially that's going to give you a bigger sweet spot around which you can operate on these difficult tyre temperature windows. Have they made a mistake not running more rake into the car?
I don't really subscribe to that. I think it is still in how the suspension and the aero are working together, and that's kind of irrespective of rake. I think potentially they could be even quicker if they did go to a rake car, but clearly their philosophy has been working for 4 years.
Yeah.
Maybe no need to make any sort of rash changes. But clearly, you know, the car puts lots of energy into its tyres. The tyres don't like being hot, they don't like being cold, as you say, it's that window. And Mercedes just aren't, you know, we've seen this over previous years, that they've been really struggling to get the tyres working, and, you know, they run really well on the medium tyres because they can cope with the amount of energy that the Mercedes puts in them in a race situation.